We are here to understand the basic relational concepts of relational algebra, the RDBMS. Here we'll be discussing about the designing of logical models. We'll recognize and develop how to develop the RDBMS model, how to apply and employ basic rules of constituting the RDBMS model and demonstrate a successful one. And then we'll understand how to examine those operations in a dynamic sense by making extensive use of the amortized analysis, and as a whole we'll try and have an introduction to the RDBMS objective over here. Now this will be useful for the faculty members, instructors, students, basically everyone who gets to use the RDBMS concept. Now these are the topics that we shall discuss around: the basic relational concepts, the database objects, designing the logical model, developing the relational model. One by one. This definition applies to all types of databases. So these can be different types, either like hierarchical, network, a flat file, or relational one. It's based on the order tree. The relative order of the subtrees are important. Each node here in the hierarchy represents a record type. Each link represents an association between two records. So for example, here it shows hierarchical database having one-to-many relationship. It consists of the records and links between two records. The records represent the entity sets. The links between the records represent the association between the entity sets. Records in a network model usually do have a MS2N or a many-to-many relationship. It's a subset of the relational model that we have already discussed. It consists only one entity, and the relations must be set up in a manual manner. An entity is described as in terms of the attributes. As for example, the employees may have the attributes employee ID, social security number, name, and the job title.
Domain of the attribute.
Now here each piece of data called the component of the data item must be a part of the domain of the attribute itself.
For example, the domain of social security numbers is 000-00-000 through 999-99-999. In relational database design, entities are modeled as tables called relations. The attribute names must be unique so that different attributes with the same domain can be identified. The rows of a relational table contain the data items or components. A relationship is a correspondence between two entities or elements of an entity about which there is a need to maintain information. A one-to-one relationship, a one-to-n relationship, an n-to-m relationship. Relationships among the attributes of an entity and among entity sets are represented by a formal model called the relational data model. The basic storage structure in a relational database is a table, a two-dimensional matrix.
Here each column of the table represents an attribute. Each column will have a label to it, referred to as the attribute name or the column name. and the columns will have a type, which will be referred to as the attribute type. And each element in the column has a value that is derived from the domain of the attribute. That should stick to the domain, and the domain should be atomic.
A key is an attribute that identifies an instance in an entity. A relational table may have several keys.
One of those many keys can have arbitrarily designed as a primary key. It must be unique and have a definite value.
A foreign key is a key, a set of attributes of an entity, which is the primary key of an associated entity set.
And via the referential integrity constraint, we need to make sure that if there is a foreign key in some table, that should be kept as a primary key in some other table.
Indexes are special objects for searching through the contents of the tables in the database.
An index consists of a key and a row number pair. Indexes allow for key access to the contents of a row in a table.
A view is a virtual table that can be accessed like a normal table. The first step in the logical design process is to build a conceptual model of the database.
This will include to make a few decisions, like what data to include in the database, the characteristics of those data, the relationships among the data, what events affect the data, and how to make the data available to the users.
Logical design is an iterative exercise.
And it will also include the steps like identifying the entities, determining the relationship between the entities, determining the entity properties, identifying the primary business rules, and then attributes and the entity.
There are 4 steps involved in identifying the entities.
Like interviewing the user, identifying the major data item, identifying the entities, and relationalize the entities into the sets.
The properties of entities
Can be defined as to choose the primary key of the entity, identify the foreign key, and if required, identify the alternate keys too. Let's get back.
The next step in the data modeling process is to normalize the relationships.
Normalizing is basically nothing but a simplification. The objective is to remove redundant information. The goal is to reduce an all n:m relationship to 1:n if possible. To do this, new entities must be created. If
The advantages of a normalized design.
The amount of storage space required is minimized, data inconsistency is reduced, as we have said, and deletion and updation anomalies are removed.
There are 3 stages in the normalization process.
A first, second, and a third normal form to begin with.
An entity is in first normal form if it does not have any repeating groups.
Here we need to make sure that each attribute is atomic and has a unique meaning. The entity is put in the first normal form by moving the repeated groups or multiple values into a new entity.
An entity set is in second normal form when the non-key attributes of an entity in first normal form are wholly dependent on the entire primary key.
As the primary key is the minimal set of attributes that uniquely identifies an instance of an entity, in the second normal form the non-key attributes can depend on other non-key attributes as well as the primary key.
An entity is in third normal form if it is in second normal form, and the non-key attributes depend on the primary key and only the primary key. The data manipulation language is used to maintain user.
Let's get to a quiz and check how it is done. Suppose here we need to match the steps. For creating a database in the correct order. Denormalize if necessary, define the rules of association, create the tables using, identify the tables, design them, create the business rule, identify the attributes, develop the rules, tune to the performance. So we can go ahead and create them one by one. Let's check out another quiz. The columns of a table contain of the data items. The columns contain. We can go into the next, or rather we can get back to the previous one, click on it and submit, and we can go ahead. uniquely identify the data item is called a primary key. So we can write it and submit. We can go ahead with this and complete with this. Let's take another one. Business rules. We will go ahead as such. We completed this as so. Thus we get to an overview of the understanding of RDBMS. It's just a given concept and the overview done. And it is developed by the group members of this particular team.